Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Dirty Air Podcast here on NASCAR.com or iTunes or YouTube or wherever you want to listen and watch this. Maybe Audio Boom. Are you on there? Audioboom.com. We're on there. You should be too. But we are here at the NASCAR.com radio studios outside of the NASCAR Hall of Fame. I'm Chuck Bush. We've got Jonathan Merriman in the studio with us, and joining us is writer for NASCAR.com, Zach Albert. Hello, Zach.
Good to see you guys.
Welcome,
as always.
Welcome back to the Dirty Air Podcast. It's been a little while since you've been on here.
It has been too long. Last fall, I've just been waiting in the bullpen, ready to get the call.
You're called up.
Well, yeah, it's a new season, so we've been, trying out a little bit of a rotation. We've got Regan Smith on here a good bit. Now we got Zach Albert. Hopefully we'll get Kenny Bruce on here at some point. He's kicking our butts right now in fantasy.
I have perfect attendance.
Yeah.
On every show.
I don't.
You would do that. Gold star.
Yeah.
Gold star for you.
I was tardy a couple of times. But anyway.
That sounds right.
Yeah. You know what wasn't tardy? Auto Club Speedway. It was on time. They started it with the green flag and all that stuff. Couple of races out there. And in all honesty, that has been one of the tracks the past couple of years that the racing has just gotten better and better as the track has aged and they've worked on these downforce packages. And this weekend, it did not disappoint, did it?
No, not at all. I mean, the surface just continues to age. I mean, it's the oldest one on the circuit. I mean, and it's produced some fantastic racing. Just the way, not only that they fanned out on restarts, but also just the way that you had comers and goers through the pack. There was a stint there in the second half of the race where we had 6 cars and they were changing lanes like it was a dirt track race, slipping, sliding around. So I think when you have the combination of the surface, the right tire, and the right aero package, and I think they can even go more on that. I mean, it produces a great package, and I think I'm excited for Michigan, which quite similar in terms of layout and everything like that. So I mean, I'm completely satisfied with the type of racing that we had this weekend.
Well, you look at that track when it like from its inception in the early days of that track, people didn't like it. People didn't like watching racing there. But like you said, it's a big, wide, old surface, slick surface track now, which, I mean, you watch the cars go through there, they'll enter on the bottom, and they'll exit up high, and that's not because that's the line they wanted to run. That's because the cars wouldn't hold on to the bottom of the track because it's so worn out. I thought it was great. Both races were great.
And we went there twice a year too, used to. And now that we have one, that's this one, showcase event that's in Southern California, I think that's I almost think you diluted your audience by having 2 races out there. So I think part of that's rearranging the schedule and having that alignment right.
It's a special racetrack for sure. They should they're lucky to have that place there.
Well, and the stands looked to be packed on Sunday. There were celebrities out there. It seemed like you said, it is this showcase track in Southern California, and it didn't disappoint. You saw guys trying different lines throughout the race to see what they could get work, and the tire fall off. There was one point Kevin Harvick didn't come in, or he pitted a little earlier than everybody else, and then there was a restart, and Jimmy Johnson had him. So those tires, even after 1 or 2 laps, were falling off, which I think just made the racing that much better. And that race, Jimmy Johnson gets his second win of the season, and that puts him ahead of Dale Earnhardt Sr. He is now 7th on the all-time wins list. So it's a historic win for Jimmy Johnson.
He did it in his hometown, his home racetrack, which is huge for him. But, I mean, Jimmy Johnson's an incredible race car driver. We could argue till we're blue in the face over who's the best race car driver of all time. Jimmy's up there in the argument for sure.
Yeah, and at this rate, I mean, he's nipping on Yarborough and Allison's heels. Waltrip, he's already in the stratosphere. But we're talking about people that were in the Hall of Fame second class.
You think he'll break 100?
It's going to be tough.
He's in great shape.
But I don't know if he can catch Jeff Gordon.
Oh,
I don't know.
Come on.
I don't know. Nothing is guaranteed.
No, nothing's guaranteed. But what's the average like winning 5 races a year?
It's been very little let up. I mean, you look at it. I mean, how many bad years can you think of that he's had? I mean, the past 2 years notwithstanding with some of the early chase exits, but still, I mean, he's going to get, multiple wins a year, and I don't see that stopping. I mean, his drive continues to, just be at a very high level. And
he doesn't have many bad tracks, and after this little Easter break, we're heading to Martinsville, which
that's a good track for Jimmy Johnson.
Yeah.
And
No slouch.
I think it is a fair thing to say that that drive for 7, it's now in full swing, and we could be looking at history this year. Could be. I don't want to jinx him, but speaking of champions, our Sprint Cup Series champion, Kyle Busch, was in the Xfinity race. He was looking at going 4 for 4 on the Xfinity Series races, and he led 133 laps out there and then didn't win.
Well, I mean, he was three-wheeling it, kind of like Snoop Dogg in SoCal, right? But he didn't quite make it to the finish line first. But a valiant effort by Kyle Busch driving on 3 good years.
That may have been one of the more bizarre finishes to a race that I have seen since I've been watching NASCAR.
Right, and you had the lead change hands. I mean, 3 different, before they even got back to the line, you had 3 different people win with Suarez, and then eventually Austin Dillon. But and that brought up another kind of controversy with. The caution could have come out any time, and had it frozen the field at any certain stage of the game, there were 3 different people who could have won that race in the last lap.
It was 3 passes for the lead on that lap. It was just nuts.
And you can check out that highlight on NASCAR.com. Austin,
shameless.
Shameless. Well, that's what I do.
We do.
We
do.
Yeah, we do.
Chuck's a commercial.
He is.
NASCAR.com. We got highlights.
Yep.
Check them out.
Chuck Busch, brought to you by
Chuck Busch. If you want to sponsor the show, I don't need to sponsor it myself. So Zach Albert, you can jump on and sponsor the Dirty Air podcast. Brought to you by Zach Albert.
Would love to.
Yeah. So there was a little bit of drama after that race. Kyle Busch was vocal about the fact that NASCAR didn't bring out that caution.
Sure.
And I know Steve O'Donnell referenced that.
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny because if you look at the, transcript, you don't get the sarcasm and the over the top, him popping off at that. So I don't know. I mean, competition officials have really made it clear that yes, they want people to show passion and show their emotions and not be just, really rigid about, they want them to have some freedom of speech. There's limits to that, as we saw with some of the post-race Twitter comments and how far some of those went. But, I think they want them to, it's within reason, I think is kind of a gray area in terms of where that line is.
You're darned if you do and darned if you don't. If you're NASCAR in that situation, if you're a driver in that situation. You can't fault NASCAR for not throwing a caution when Kyle Busch is still driving around the track at speed at that moment. I mean, he only lost that race by a couple hundred feet.
He finished second on 3 tires.
He finished second. That's amazing that Kyle Busch did that, but he continued on in the race. So did everybody else. But then, we get mad at these guys afterwards because they do comment on things, but we have to remember they're not, except for Jimmy Johnson, they're not superheroes. You know what I mean? They're human. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to say things that they regret. And we saw a lot of that this weekend. And the way I kind of separate that is with my interaction with those guys at the track, like Kyle Busch, Joey Logano, Cole Pearn, they've all been nice to me. When I've talked to them, they've all been nice to me. That's the only thing I have to judge them off of. So, I mean, they're going to make mistakes. Kyle Busch is going to say things he regrets. People are going to tweet things they regret.
It's the competitor.
Yeah.
It's the competitor in them, and we've talked about this before on this show. That's the fire that you want to see out of someone who is competing.
Yeah.
I don't want you to be happy that, you didn't win a race. I want you to be a little bit ticked off because that shows me that you want to be there and you want to win.
We've all said dumb things in the heat of the moment.
Sure. Well, and here we are 20 seconds after they get out of the cars, their nerves are all up, adrenaline, tension, and we're like,
microphone.
Hey, how'd that go?
Yeah.
How'd they go? How was that? And it's like, well, how do you think? So, I mean, what are you going to do? Damn media.
The camera out there and all that stuff. And there were a lot of on-track incidents in the Cup race. We saw Casey Kane and Danica Patrick have a little bit of a tussle. And Danica voiced her displeasure by raising her arms and walking towards the track.
Which, raise your arms all you want to, but you're allowed to exit the car if if the safety crew's not there and the car is smoking or on fire. You're allowed to do that. But you can't walk up towards the racetrack. You just can't. That's cut and dry in the rule book. So
and the rule book does say walking toward the racing surface or the apron. And so you can fine tooth it all you want, because there were two different lines. She wasn't up on the track itself, but
there were cars that ran where she was standing,
right,
at race speeds,
right, and caution speed there. They hadn't quite they weren't quite under like a cautious pace. Even then the caution car speed is what, 60, 70 there. I mean, it's that's still it's still a volatile type situation.
But it all comes back to heat of the moment. We all make mistakes. We're all human. She was mad. She got wrecked. She got turned. She got hit in the right rear quarter panel, which if you talk to any driver out there, they say no, you just don't do that.
Well, looking at that move, did she drift up the track or did Casey come down?
Well, the position was hers. So, I mean.
And Casey did say after the race that he felt bad. And he was definitely glad that she was okay, but that was, he took responsibility for that incident. So
yeah, and they weren't racing for position. It was the word that they keep coming back to is avoidable. And yeah, both sides certainly could have avoided it. It's whether it's 60-40 and Casey's the pendulum going that way, but there were plenty of ways that race, that contest could have been avoided.
And we do have to point out that as of taping of this show on Tuesday, we do not know what the potential penalties are from NASCAR. They are being reviewed probably as we're talking about them right now.
True.
And hopefully there will be something on NASCAR.com by the time you're listening to this telling you what the penalties are. Another incident, or not really incident that's being looked at, but you saw Joey Logano and Martin Truex Jr., they didn't touch, but Joey kind of moved Martin out of the way with, took a little bit of air off the rear of the car and it bobbled and he got out of the way. Cole Pern was a little bit mad about that after the race. I'm not going to say what the tweet was, but you can check it out on NASCAR.com, another shameless plug. But that incident, was he justified, as a crew chief, justified to be ticked off?
Yeah, you had a car capable of winning the race that was, that brushed the wall and hurt its performance. So, I mean, winning's everything in the Cup Series or in all three top series now with the chase format. You get a win, you're in the chase. So, yeah, you kind of feel robbed. But luckily, we have, 31 more races to go this year. So,
yeah. And that team has had kind of an up and down year, from finishing second in Daytona and some of the technical infractions. Pern was just back from suspension. So, I mean, I don't know. I think there's a lot of scrutiny and a lot of eyeballs on that team. So, they've been a great performer. It's just the stakes are still pretty high, even though it's we're only 5 races in.
I got to be honest, I'm a little biased because I had Martin Truex Jr. on my fantasy roster. And at one point, I had Kevin Harvick, Denny Hamlin, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Martin Truex Jr., and then sort of a value pick of Matt DiBenedetto. That was a pretty solid lineup. And then Joey kind of moved my guy out of the way, and he lost a couple of spots. And
right.
I kind of dropped back. But I got beat pretty bad in fantasy this week.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I still finished ahead of you, Zach.
Yeah.
But in the overall standings, at this point so far, though, you're still up there. And it's a tight race, and it's early in the season. And we're looking at this from a fantasy standpoint. You got guys like Jimmy Johnson, 2 wins. Kevin Harvick, he's got to win. Denny Hamlin got to win. The Gibbs cars are fast. If we're looking at the season from, say a fantasy standpoint right now, what are your thoughts on the season so far?
I don't know if my thoughts amount to anything because in our Dirty Air League, I am 7th out of 8 people, and I'm in front of Matthew Dillner, one behind Chuck Bush. But I mean, it's just so hard because any given week, I don't like to move my lineup around. I, usually stick with a lineup unless, I have a value pick that I can trade out for somebody who I think's better at a plate race or something. So I usually just let it ride. And early on, I'm just not having any luck. So I don't know if I'm the one to tell you about fantasy at this point in the season. I did have Jimmy Johnson and Kevin Harvick in my lineup, so that's 1-2. But I also had Kyle Larson, who I thought would do well, and that didn't go well.
Yeah, he had that incident in practice, and then in the race, he had another incident. Zach, you're sitting 4th. Now, Regan Smith is leading our league right now, but of the people in this room, you are currently the highest ranked.
Yeah,
so
still not exactly setting the world on fire, but I mean, yeah, among this crowd, I'll take it. So, but
it's early in the season.
It's
Absolutely.
early in the year with a new rules package, and people are going to be hot. People are not going to be hot. Based on like where they were last year. So. Take a little time, take a couple races, figure it out. Hopefully by the time we get to Talladega, I'll be okay.
Have you guys got any bold predictions for the rest of the season that you can make after 5 races?
Gosh. Bold predictions.
Yeah, bold predictions.
Put you on the spot.
Yeah.
Gosh, one of the surprise picks that I had for, in like our preseason superlatives was I thought Clint Boyer would make the chase. I thought that some of the stuff that, he's able to do driving wise would overcome some of the deficit of being a small team, similar to what Kurt Busch did in his time with the 51 bunch at that point, and they just haven't had it. I'd still like to think where some of those things can be a little bit more equal, like on a short track or some such, that yes, that they could get their act together and be in there, but. Boy, it's been a rough start to the season. So I'd like to stand by that bold prediction, that I'd made at the start of the year. I don't want to backtrack from it just yet, but I just haven't seen a whole lot out of that team yet and still waiting for that.
Chase Elliott does not know that he has a yellow stripe across his rear bumper, and neither does Ryan Blaney. I think, if not one, both of those guys have a pretty good chance at winning a race this year. Chase surprised me. I didn't think Chase would do as well as he's doing. I thought Ryan would be the better rookie early on to mid-season because, he had raced, those cup races in the past. Now, Chase, I guess, raced 5, but I think Ryan had raced more than that.
But those were 5 of some of the tougher tracks.
Yeah.
And if you saw the way he ran in those races, even though he didn't have that great of finishes, I would argue that he was showing something last season running on those tracks.
That don't put a mirror in front of him because he doesn't know he's young and he doesn't know it's his first. Don't let him see his NASCAR license that says first-year Cup driver. Just, put the blinders on him and let him go because he's so fast.
They completely did that on purpose. I mean, they sent him to
Darlington,
to Martinsville, some of the tougher racetracks, and the 5 tracks, as I recall, they were pretty much all over the place just to kind of give them a sampling of all there was to offer. So
trial by fire.
But the question is, which one of those top 2 rookies wins first?
My bold prediction is Chase Elliott wins first.
Where?
Well, here's the even bolder prediction.
You going to say Martinsville?
Not this Martinsville, maybe. But I think it'll either be Darlington or Martinsville.
Well, see, I think Ryan Blaney's going to make the chase. I think he's going to win.
Well, right now, they're both right there.
Yeah. I mean,
right now, I think Chase is in and Ryan is just out. If I'm I haven't looked at that in a couple of days, but if I'm remembering correctly.
I mean, it's so nice to see young kids competing, especially I'm from Virginia. So anytime the Wood brothers are running well, I'm going to be happy about that. So,
yeah.
All right, so I'm going to put you on the spot again here. Real quick, I want your headline for this season so far. Jonathan, go.
Rookies run remarkably well, and we'll leave it at that.
All right.
I would say sunny skies and low downforce. That's the biggest thing, those 2 things. We've had great weather, we've had great aero package, and I think it's just going to get better.
I'm going to say NASCAR by a nose.
Because
we've had some really tight finishes there at the end.
Oh, yeah.
It's been some pretty exciting racing. Well, this has been an exciting podcast today here on NASCAR.com. So for everybody here in the Dirty Air podcast, for Jonathan Merriman, for Zach Albert, I'm Chuck Bush, reminding you to hop out there in that clean air, chase down the leader, and we'll see you next week back in the pack here in the Dirty Air.